You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, global environmental action, a top priority as US climate envoy John Kerry becomes the highest-ranking Biden administration official to visit Moscow. LED light bulbs, smart appliances and hydrogen boilers, what the future could look like in a net-zero Britain. And find out what it's like to spend months on a ship frozen in the Arctic ice, all in the name of climate science. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes happening to our world right now and we meet those coming up with the solutions. Now, they're two of the world's biggest emitters of greenhouse gases, so action on climate change taken by the United States and Russia has huge implications for the rest of the world. Today, US climate envoy John Kerry is in Moscow meeting Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov ahead of the COP26 summit in November. Well, Russia is a signatory to the international Paris climate deal agreed by 196 parties back in 2015. But its climate policies are critically insufficient, according to Climate Action Tracker. The country's emissions are the fourth highest in the world, behind China, the United States and India. But it continues to focus on development and export of fossil fuels, mainly natural gas. Emissions in Russia are expected to carry on at the same rate or to continue growing until at least 2030, with the government's own targets allowing them to increase without missing international commitments. Yet the effects of climate change there are stark. The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world, and home to more than a fifth of the world's forests, the country has seen 2 years of record-breaking wildfires. Urban populations are feeling the impact too. Moscow recorded its hottest ever June day last month, reaching just over 34 degrees. Well, with me now is our diplomatic editor, Dominic Waghorn. Hello, Dominic. And this is an economy, isn't it, that's deeply embedded in oil and gas revenues.
It is, but I think John Kerry will be going with a message that you need to clean up your act for your own good. He'll probably point out that Russia is heating up faster than most of the rest of the world, 2.5 times the average of the rest of the world. And that is leading to huge problems, as you say, forest fires, huge flooding, and also the permafrost flooding. And that's doing things like releasing methane, but also anthrax. So there are real nightmare scenarios unfolding in terms of environment in Russia already. And the country's in the middle of a heatwave, so it's a good time for John Kerry to be going there. The good news is Vladimir Putin seems to be noticing this and worrying about it. He most recently said in a speech that mankind has got to minimise its impact on the environment. And the other good news is that Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin last month kind of agreed to agree on what they could agree on. So to set their relationship, which has been at a terrible low, on a more functional level. It is hugely important for John Kerry to make progress there. As you say, Russia has quite a small economy, about the size of Italy's, given the proportion of the size of the country, but it is the fourth biggest carbon emitter in the world. So there's a lot of margin in it, climate margin, if you like, for John Kerry to try and exploit there. The bad news for him is that Vladimir Putin has already specifically said that foreign governments should not be using climate as a kind of leverage to put pressure on his own government. His economy is in a pretty parlous state, not least because of Western sanctions, so it doesn't kind of have the sort of resources that might be necessary to clean up its act. And the other bad news really for John Kerry is that actually climate change is quite good for Russia in the north, because it's melting the Arctic sea ice, and that is opening up that area to exploitation for oil and gas, but also for shipping routes. So there's room for progress for John Kerry there, but I think he's going to have to manage his expectations as far as to what he's likely to get out of Sergei Lavrov, who he's meeting there.
Delicate conversations ahead. Dominic, thank you. In today's other climate news, severe droughts, hot weather and heavy rain could all become more common in the UK if global warming hits 2 degrees. A study published in the journal Climatic Change found high-impact weather events will become more frequent and more intense as temperatures rise. Severe droughts will become 86% more likely, while snow days look less common as temperatures below 0 degrees could decrease from 50 days down to 34. Greenhouse gas emissions from global listed companies could exceed internationally agreed targets in just 6 years, according to analysis by index provider MSCI. It found many businesses would need to drastically cut their emissions to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The analysis studied the climate policies and disclosures of more than 9,000 listed companies. 2 blazes caused by lightning strikes have combined to create the largest wildfire of the year in California. The fire, which spans at least 134 square miles, has been worsened by a heat wave, the second to hit the northwest United States. The extreme heat has dried out surrounding vegetation, making it flammable, causing the fire to spread rapidly. But an unlikely weapon being deployed by firefighters comes in the form of 80 goats. By grazing on the tinder-dry grass in the region, these animals are helping to prevent the fire from spreading further, protecting homes and wildlife there. Well, let's take a look at our data dashboard now and the real-time power mix in Great Britain, essentially where our electricity is coming from. Well, at the moment, around 54% is coming from fossil fuels, 26% from renewable sources and 20% coming from nuclear. But if the government is to meet its target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 78% by 2035 and to reach net zero by 2050, those numbers will have to change. Well, the National Grid electricity system operator has been looking at how energy use in the UK might change in the next 3 decades. They modelled 4 different scenarios and found that the government's targets can be met, but only if consumers embrace new ways to use power and urgent action is taken to increase energy efficiency measures. Well, joining me to take a look into the future is Matthew Wright, Head of Strategy and Regulation at National Grid ESO. Hello, Matthew. Just talk us through what kind of things we all need to start doing over the next couple of years.
Good afternoon. Yes, we've published our scenarios again this year, as you say, looking out to 2050. There are a number of key messages in there, but the one you highlight about consumer involvement is arguably the most important. Our scenarios to hit net zero require quite a number of lifestyle changes. We're all moving to electric vehicles, but we're going to need to have smart charging of those vehicles, smart appliances in our house to make use of our off-peak electricity. And there's even some changes required to lifestyle habits, turning down thermostats, and obviously the stories that we hear about changing our diets to some degree to reduce the amount of red meat and other things that we eat.
Some of the bigger changes, Matthew, come at a cost, don't they? Should the government be sharing in that cost?
Well, I believe they already are. So if we look at what's happened in recent years, the growth of renewable power sources, for example, offshore wind has been a major success story. That's been driven by the government providing what's called contracts for differences or subsidies to offshore wind in order to bring down the costs of that new form of generation. That's been spectacularly successful. I think going forward, we need similar sort of policy decisions around new technologies that we will need, not least hydrogen to replace natural gas for home heating, and indeed potentially for making electricity, and potentially to fund energy efficiency measures in people's homes to bring up the thermal efficiency of our housing stock. OK,
Matthew Wright, good to talk to you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, in the latest in our series of climate diaries, we're hearing from Elisa Droster. The PhD student was part of a mission to take the closest ever look at the Arctic as the epicentre of global warming. She told us what it was like to spend months on a ship frozen in ice.
We had cake every single day. Cake makes scientists happy, and happy scientists do good science. The German icebreaker Polarstern was frozen into the Arctic sea ice, and it drifted along with the sea ice for an entire year. Scientists were rotated through every few months, and I was on the final leg of this expedition. The Arctic Ocean, and especially the frozen Arctic Ocean, is stunningly beautiful. There's this phenomenon where you have some melt on the surface of the sea ice and it creates these beautiful melt ponds that have the most fantastic colors of blue. My research involved exploring the carbon dioxide uptake of the Arctic Ocean, how it changes throughout the seasons, and what it means when we have less or no sea ice. For me, this expedition was one big, epic scientific adventure. It was really intense, incredibly exciting at the same time. It allowed me to personally experience the vulnerability of the Arctic to a changing climate. It's much more impactful to see this with your own eyes and experiencing it with your own senses instead of just seeing it in a graph that's published in a scientific article.
An extraordinary experience. And finally, cannabis. Yes, cannabis could be a possible solution to climate change. Hemp, a specific variety of the plant, is being used to cut carbon emissions in everything from fashion to construction. Here's how. Well, that is everything from us for today. Next time, how fossil fuels could have a part to play in a zero-carbon future. Find out how at the same time tomorrow here on the Daily Climate Show. Thanks for watching.